Hi, it's Mark Donegan with the Marketing Execution Podcast. Most founders spend 2 years in pre-product market fit hell. The culprit? They build things nobody wants despite doing customer interviews and validation exercises. This episode tackles the 0 to 1 stage differently. Specifically, Rob Snyder took his company from 0 to 4 million in annual recurring revenue in 2 years. As someone who's worked with dozens of B2B companies finding their footing, I've seen this backwards approach work. Now here's our conversation on cracking product market fit.
Tune in, listen up, it's marketing time. Bright ideas sparking, blowing your mind. From strategies to big exec dreams. Catch the buzz and join the execution. Marketing Convo.
Welcome to the Marketing Execution Podcast. This is the show for tech founders and leaders building B2B products and technologies. We show you how to go further, faster to get the business results you need.
From strategies to big exec dreams. Catch the buzz and join the execution. Marketing Convo.
Hey, Mark, you know how we talk to founders constantly, and they're always asking about growth hacks and marketing tactics and, well, the shiny stuff.
Oh yeah, the shiny stuff. Everyone wants the shiny stuff.
Right? But I came across this workshop from Rob Snyder, and he calls out something that made me genuinely uncomfortable. He says most 0 to 1 advice is actually counterproductive. Like it sends founders straight into what he calls the pain cave.
Pain cave. I love that term because it's so accurate. Look, I've seen this happen dozens of times. Smart founders, like legitimately brilliant people with McKinsey backgrounds, Harvard MBAs, they read all the books, follow all the frameworks, and then they spend 18 to 24 months just suffering.
But why though? If they're doing everything right, why does it feel so wrong?
Okay, so here's the thing that nobody talks about on the Marketing Execution Podcast or anywhere else really. There are 2 critical mistakes founders make, and they're both related to the same fundamental misunderstanding. They confuse supply with demand. And I know that sounds like Econ 101, but stay with me here because this is everything.
All right, break it down for me.
So founders spend all their time on supply side stuff, their product, their value prop, their unique features, their benefits. They're constantly thinking about what they control. But you know what? Nobody cares about your product.
That's harsh, man.
I know, but it's true. Nobody wakes up excited to buy new enterprise software. Nobody. What people care about is accomplishing their projects, their goals, the stuff that's on their mental to-do list. Demand exists whether you exist or not. You don't create it. You find it and you harness it.
Okay, so how do you actually find it then?
This is where it gets really practical. Snyder has this mental model that I think is brilliant. He says, imagine you could look into your prospect's project management software, like their Asana board or whatever they use. They've got 1 million projects in backlog, right? But at any given time, they can only prioritize 1 or 2 things.
Sure, that makes sense.
So your job is to figure out which project does your product fit into? When do they prioritize that project versus all the others? What causes them to finally say, okay, today's the day I have to deal with this? And when they do prioritize it, what options do they consider?
So you're basically reverse engineering their decision-making process.
Exactly. And this leads to the second huge insight, which is about how to actually structure your entire business around this.
Which is what?
1 case study. Your business is literally just a system to replicate 1 successful case study over and over again.
So 1, that seems limiting.
I know it sounds crazy, but think about it. 1 case study can take you to 1 million, 10 million, even 100 million plus in revenue. The problem is founders try to be everything to everyone. They have like 5 different customer types and 3 different value props, and it's chaos. Every additional case study makes things exponentially harder.
So how do you build this case study?
Okay, so here's the framework. It's 6 parts, and it maps perfectly to demand and supply. The first 3 parts are the demand side. What project was this person trying to accomplish? Why was this project prioritized versus everything else they could have done? And what options did they consider?
So you're basically telling their story before you even get to your product.
Yes, that's the whole point. The demand side makes your supply side relevant. Then the last three parts are supply. What results did they achieve? How exactly did they complete the project with your help? And what did they actually buy?
And you use this in sales calls?
This is your sales call. You're not showing your product and trying to persuade people. You're sitting on the same side of the table as your prospect, exploring a similar company's case study and letting that story do the persuading. You're basically asking them, do you want this to be you?
That's actually really elegant.
And here's the kicker. You start with a theoretical case study. You don't need real customers yet. You draft what you think the case study is, then you use it to sell, and based on what happens in those sales conversations, you debug it until you get to hell yes.
Hell yes, pre-sale and post-sale.
Right, because here's something founders forget. Product market fit is measured by retention, not just growth. You can grow like crazy and still not have product market fit if everyone churns. The case study has to work all the way through.
This is making me rethink a lot of the advice I've heard about validation and customer interviews and all that.
Look, customer interviews are fine, but there's a massive difference between social transactions and economic transactions. When money's not on the line, people are generous and encouraging. They'll tell you your idea is great. But when you actually ask for the credit card, completely different part of the brain lights up. That's why selling is the only way to figure this out for real.
Though the path out of the pain cave is basically sell something, learn from it, adjust, and repeat.
That's it. Draft a theoretical case study, use it to try to sell, debug based on what you learn, and keep iterating until you get that pull instead of push. When you found real demand, it feels like customers are pulling you toward them. When you haven't, everything feels like pushing a boulder uphill.
Mark, that's fascinating. Let's pivot for a second and talk about what this actually looks like in practice. Like, what does the first sales conversation sound like when you're using this case study approach?
You know what, Tim? That first sales conversation is actually way less scary than people think because you're not really selling anything.
Wait, what do you mean you're not selling? You just spent the last few minutes telling me that selling is the only way to figure this out.
Yeah, I know. Let me explain. When you walk into that first conversation with your case study approach, you're basically sitting on the same side of the table as your prospect. You're not across from them trying to convince them of anything.
So it's more like a conversation than a pitch.
Exactly. And this is why it matters so much for founders who feel gross about sales. You're not being pushy. You're literally just exploring whether their situation matches the story you're telling.
Okay, but here's what I'm still wrestling with. Why does this approach actually work better than the traditional way of showing your product and listing all your amazing features?
Oh man, this is the part that took me forever to really get. So think about what happens in a typical sales call. Founder walks in, super excited about their product. They start showing screens, clicking through demos, talking about how their AI is better than everyone else's AI.
Right, the whole dog and pony show.
Exactly. And the prospect is sitting there nodding politely, but inside their head, they're thinking, okay, cool, but what does this have to do with me? What does this have to do with the project that's been keeping me up at night?
Because they don't care about your product.
They don't, but they do wake up stressed about that thing on their Asana board that's been sitting there for like 3 months, the project they keep pushing off because they don't know how to tackle it.
So the case study approach flips the whole thing around.
It does. Instead of starting with what you control, your product, your features, you start with what they're experiencing. You're basically saying, hey, I talked to someone who sounds a lot like you. Here's what was going on in their world. Does this sound familiar?
And if it resonates, they're already leaning in before you've even mentioned your product.
Yes, that's the pull instead of push thing I mentioned earlier. When you nail the demand side of the story, the prospect is literally pulling you toward them. They're asking questions. They want to know more. You're not chasing them down the hallway trying to get a second meeting.
Thinking about this from the prospect's perspective now, it must feel so different to be in one of these conversations versus a traditional demo.
Night and day. I know of a company that completely transformed their close rate just by restructuring their sales calls this way. They went from maybe 15% close rate to over 60%. Same product, same price, same target customer. The only thing that changed was how they talked about it.
That's wild. So they weren't even changing what they were selling.
Not at all. They just stopped leading with supply and started leading with demand. They stopped talking about themselves and started talking about the prospect's world.
Okay, so here's the thing that founders always push back on. What if you don't have a real case study yet? What if you're pre-revenue and you've never actually helped anyone?
Great question. And this is where people get stuck because they think they need proof before they can sell. But here's the thing. You start with a theoretical case study. You draft what you think the story is based on your understanding of the market.
But isn't that kind of making stuff up?
No. You're not lying to anyone. You're being transparent. You might say something like, look, here's a situation I typically see with companies like yours. Here's how I think we can help. Does this match what you're experiencing? And then you listen. It's the best way to validate your assumptions. Way better than customer interviews where no money's on the line. Because when you're actually asking someone to buy, a completely different part of their brain lights up. They stop being polite and encouraging. They get real with you.
Because it's an economic transaction, right? This is making me think about how much time founders waste on validation exercises that don't actually prove anything.
So much time. I've seen founders spend 18 months doing customer discovery, running experiments, building MVPs based on feedback. And then when they finally try to sell, crickets. Because they never tested the thing that actually matters, whether someone will pay and whether they'll be happy after they pay. That's the retention piece. Product market fit isn't just about growth. You can grow like crazy and still fail if everyone churns.
So the case study has to work all the way through the customer journey.
All the way through, pre-sale and post-sale. You need that hell yes moment when they buy, and you need that hell yes moment when they've been using it for a few months and they can't imagine going back.
Mark, I want to dig into something you mentioned earlier about debugging the case study, because I think that's where the real learning happens, right? It's not just about having the pitch, it's about what you do after each conversation.
This is everything. Every single sales call is an opportunity to learn, not just the ones that close, but especially the ones that don't. When someone says no, or when they go silent, or when they have objections, that's gold, because it tells you where the story is breaking down. And here's how I think about it. Your case study has 6 parts, right? Project, context, options, results, how, and what. Each part is like a stage in a funnel. If people drop off on the demand side, you never even get the chance to show them the supply side.
So you need a hell yes on every single slide.
Every single one. And when you're reviewing your calls, you're looking for where people's eyes glazed over. Where did they start asking confused questions? Where did they push back? That's where you need to make changes.
This feels like such a practical framework for actually making progress instead of spinning your wheels.
And the beautiful thing is it compounds. Each conversation makes your case study a little bit sharper, a little bit more aligned with real demand, until eventually you hit that moment where prospects are finishing your sentences. They're nodding before you even get to the next slide.
That's the pool you keep talking about.
Yeah, and when you feel it, you know. It's unmistakable. Everything that felt like pushing a boulder uphill suddenly feels like rolling downhill.
All right, Mark, this has been incredibly clarifying. I think our listeners are probably itching to know how they actually put this into practice. Like, what does the day-to-day look like when you're trying to find product market fit using this approach?
That is the right question because the theory is worthless without the execution. Day-to-day, you are basically doing 3 things in a loop. You are building a very specific slide deck, you are fighting to get 5 to 10 meetings a week, and then you are delivering the result manually.
Okay, let's break those down. You mentioned a slide deck, but earlier you said we aren't doing a standard product demo. So what is on these slides?
It is the case study structure we talked about. You literally make 6 slides. The first slide isn't your logo or your mission statement. It is the project.
The project on their to-do list.
Exactly. Let's use a real example. Salesforce didn't pitch CRM software. In the early days, the project was something like, goal, give our sales team one place to track every deal without installing anything.
That is super specific. It's not just better customer management. It's keep deals moving without an IT project.
Right, because that is the actual project the VP of sales cares about. The next slide is context. You explain why this matters right now. Maybe they have a big enterprise deal stalled because they don't have that security certificate.
So you're setting the stage before you even talk about yourself.
You have to. Then you hit them with the option slide. This is where you list the other ways they could solve this. They could hire a consultant for 50 grand. They could force their own engineers to stop building features and spend 2 months fixing security protocols.
I bet they hate that option.
They hate it, and that's the point. You show them the painful options they're already dreading. Then, and only then, do you show the solution slide.
That's a no-brainer comparison. But Mark, you need people to actually show this deck too. How do you get those 5 to 10 meetings a week if you're a nobody?
You use what I call founder magic. Do not try to automate this. Do not buy an email list of 10,000 people and spam them. That is how you get ignored.
So you're saying hand-to-hand combat.
I am saying you write a personal note. You find someone who definitely has that specific project. You say, hey, I'm building something to help CTOs get SOC 2 compliant in a weekend. I'm not trying to sell you yet, but I would love to run my approach by you to see if I'm crazy.
That's the cheat code. You ask for advice, but you're actually validating the demand.
And once you get them on the call, you're debugging. This is crucial. You're not pivoting. I hate that word because it implies you just blindly change directions. You are unfolding.
Unfolding. That sounds a lot more intentional. What does that mean in practice?
It means you listen for where the hell yes stops. Maybe they nod along with the project, they agree with the context, but then you get to the solution slide and they hesitate.
So you know your problem isn't the market, it's the offer.
Precisely. Maybe they say, well, I don't believe you can do it in a weekend. Boom. Now you know you need to prove the speed. You change that one slide for the next meeting. You keep tweaking the story until you get through all 6 slides without a single hesitation.
Okay, let's say you get the hell yes. They sign the contract, but you're a tiny startup. You might not even have the product built yet. What do?
You become the software. This is the part people miss. You deliver the result by any means necessary.
Give me a concrete example of that.
There was a founder building a recruiting tool to help retail stores text their applicants faster. He sold the result. We will double your applicant response rate. But he didn't have the code written to automate it yet.
So what did he do?
He literally sat at his computer with a Google Sheet. He manually copied the phone numbers. He typed the text messages himself using a burner phone number. He did this for 10 hours a day.
That sounds miserable.
It was miserable, but the customers were happy. They got the result, they renewed their contracts, and because he was doing it manually, he learned exactly what features to build. He knew exactly which texts got a response and which ones didn't.
He built the retention before he built the software.
Retention is the only meaningful proof of product market fit. If you can manually deliver a result that keeps people paying, you have a business. If you build a fancy platform but people churn after a month, you have nothing.
Mark, this completely flips the script. We usually think idea, build, sell. You were saying idea, sell, manually fulfill, and then build.
You have to earn the right to build. The only thing that grants you that right is a paying customer who's getting value.
I love that. Earn the right to build. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground today, from the hell cave to the case study framework to this manual delivery method. Can you summarize the whole package for us?
All right, let me bring this all together. We started with a big idea that most 0 to 1 advice actually sends founders into the pain cave. The core problem is confusing supply with demand. Founders obsess over their product and features, but people care about their own projects and goals. Demand exists whether you exist or not. Your job is to find it and harness it. So we talked about building one case study with 6 parts: project, context, and options on the demand side, results, how, and what on the supply side. You use this to sell. Then you debug based on what happens. 5 to 10 calls per week, 15 minutes reviewing each one. Look for where the story breaks and make small changes. Start from the demand side first. Keep iterating until you feel pull instead of push.
Mark, after everything we've covered today, what's the one thing you really hope people don't forget?
Stop building in the dark. One way to know if your idea works is to ask someone for money. Not feedback, not encouragement, money. That's when you find out what's real. The Marketing Execution Podcast is produced by Growth Stage Marketing. We are on a mission to see your company reach wild success using marketing pods.
Too big, accept dreams. Catch the buzz and join the execution. Marketing Convo.
Thank you for listening and being a part of the marketing execution movement and community. To learn how growth stage marketing clients reach more buyers and drive business impact, go to growthstage.marketing. That's growthstage.marketing.